In this video, we're going to look at recursive functions. Recursive functions are functions that call themselves. Before we look at that, let's look at a code that does close to what our recursion function will do, only using a loop. Okay, so in this example, we have our function header, which contains our def statement, what we are going to call our function, and then what parameters we are going to use inside this function. Then we have our docstring statement. I haven't really stressed the importance of this in functions, but it is really important to have this because one tells other people what this function does. It reminds you what this function does, but it'll also display in some help features. I'll show you in just a second. Okay, so the body of this function contains a while loop. While lower is less than or equal to upper, we're going to print the value of lower. Then we're going to take the value of lower, add 1 to it, and then store that value back into lower. Now the function in and of itself doesn't do anything until we call the function. And if you notice, that's where that documentation statement came into play. So look what happens there. This right here that pops up is exactly what we typed here. So that's useful to the user. It provides them with information of what they are working on or what they need to be doing, etc. Okay, so if I put a lower value of 1 and an upper value of 5 and I run this code, we do get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're familiar with that. We understand how that works. But what would this look like as a recursion function or a recursive function? So this is the same code or displays the same results only using recursion. In our header, we called this display range. We're giving parameters of lower and upper. We have our documentation string. And this time we have an if statement. If lower is less than or equal to upper. This is our base case. If we do not have a base case in our recursive function, we would have an infinite recursion. Just like we have to have some way to get out of a loop, we have to have some way to get out of the recursion, okay? Now it's going to print the lower value, and then it's calling itself. It's calling its own function within itself. It's passing a value of lower plus 1 and then passing the value of upper. So what happens when we call this function using the same values as before? We do get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What happened here? When we called this function, we sent the value 1 to lower. We sent the value 5 to upper. Okay? So 1 is less than or equal to upper, so it printed 1 here. And then it called itself again. It called itself and said, hey, send the value lower plus 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So then it sent 2 to lower. It still sent 5 to upper. 2 is less than or equal to 5. So it printed the 2. And then it called itself with the value of 2 plus 1. So now this lower number is 3. And this is still 5, and it continues through 5. Now, if we did not have this base case here, let's look at what would happen. I'm going to take it out. I'll have to fix my indentation because, Python. And if we run this, it started printing all the way, almost got to 1,000, and then we got this recursion error. Maximum recursion depth exceeded while calling a Python object. This is a Stack Overflow error. If you've ever heard of the website Stack Overflow, this is kind of where they got their name. And hopefully in the future you'll kind of pick up more about how stacks work and understand that a little better. I've included some videos if you want to go ahead and check that out on our webpage, but those are optional. Okay, so it could not continue calling itself because eventually the computer is going to run out of memory. Our memory is not infinite. So it eventually said, hey, I'm stopping this program. I'm not going to run it forever and crash your computer. You have a recursion error. So don't forget, if you're ever doing a recursive statement, to include that base case, which provides the recursive function a way to stop. Okay, so we're not going to get crazy into recursive functions. What you need to know about them right now is that they're a function that calls themselves. They're really good at solving a problem that is a recursion problem, like the Fibonacci sequence. And I've included a video if you want to see how you could make a recursive statement using that would calculate the Fibonacci sequence. You can watch that video. And then you need to include that base case. If you don't include the base case, you get this recursion error. Okay, so these are used a lot to solve like sorting problems and things that kind of have a tree related structure. We haven't gotten that in depth into programming, so we're just kind of being introduced to, hey, these are recursions, they exist, this is what they do.